Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 158 based on novel. So let's start. The reason why Ju-zi thought that Hou would become her greatest enemy in the future was precisely because of this reason. Hou's ability to conceal himself made him much more dangerous than ordinary titled Doluo. It was most terrifying when a person's traces couldn't be found. Moreover, given Ju-zi's understanding of Hou, she knew his potential. He possessed an ultimate martial soul, and he already had 7 soul rings. There was no doubt that he would become a titled Doluo in the near future. A titled Doluo with an ultimate martial soul was even more terrifying than a titled Doluo who was an evil soul master. Hou entered through the window as usual when he returned to his hotel. He had already calmed down by now. After killing that spiritual-type soul Doluo, he had managed to achieve his aim for this mission. However, this would have greatly alarmed the enemy too. During this period of time, the Sun Moon Empire would surely increase their surveillance in the Heavenly Soul Empire's imperial palace. This was inevitable. But could he continue to wait any further? The best way was naturally to wait for them to lower their guard before continuing his surveillance. The enemy might be more relaxed after a period of tension, which would then provide a great opportunity for him. However, Hou couldn't wait any further. There were still many things he had to do. He had to quickly gather information from here. Furthermore, through the earlier all-around surveillance, he was certain that neither Ma Xiaodao nor Tang San were in the imperial palace. They were both holy ladies in the Holy Ghost Church, and they were very respected. If they were in Heaven-Do City, they would surely be in the imperial palace. Since they weren't, the likelihood that they were in this city was very small. When he thought until here, Hou's good mood diminished slightly. Without being able to find Ma Xiaodao and Tang San, it meant that his most important target of this mission wasn't achieved. How could he be happy then? What should I do? Should I try to capture an evil soul master to gather information? Hou furrowed his brow. That was the stupidest idea. Perhaps it might be effective, but it wasn't going to be easy. In addition, those evil soul masters might not know where Tang San was. But it seemed like he just had to give it a go. He sat cross-legged and pondered for a moment. After this, he decided that he couldn't think of a better plan. It seemed like capturing an evil soul master and searching his memories was the best he could do. After deciding on this strategy, he had another goal to reach. He thought about it for a moment before he started to perfect his plan. If he wanted to find an evil soul master, the best place to do so was naturally the imperial palace. However, he had just caused a ruckus in the palace. The security in the palace was bound to be very tight now. Under such a circumstance, how could he possibly capture a lone evil soul master? This was a huge problem for him. Furthermore, the evil soul master that he captured couldn't be too weak either. Otherwise, it would be difficult to get any information from him. After formulating a plan, Hou slowly entered into meditation and continued to absorb the manifold mysterious ice essence into his body. He felt as if his cultivation was improving by leaps and bounds following every session of meditation after he started to absorb the manifold mysterious ice essence. His soul power kept on getting stronger, and he was slowly becoming a soul Doluo. If not for the fact that he wasn't ready, he would really like to try out what standard his cultivation had reached. According to his own estimates, he should at least be rank 77 by now. This also meant that his soul power had improved significantly. He had reaped great rewards. The next morning, Hou entered his spectral demiplane and fed the 3 bears. After this, he went to the streets again, and proceeded in the direction of the imperial palace. As he walked the streets, he paid attention to all the chatter around him. Many people were discussing the explosive boom that came from the palace. It was even rumored that the perimeter of the palace was out of bounds right now. Hou kept on walking towards the palace, and only returned after making one round around it. He discovered that the person in charge of Heaven-Do City from the Sun Moon Empire was still very rational. He didn't seal off the entire city or make it out of bounds because of what had happened last night. The only area that was out of bounds was the street that he was on yesterday. This was because this street was where a part of the palace walls had blown apart. It was under repair now. Apart from this, everything in the palace appeared to be fine, at least from the outside. He didn't survey the inside of the palace using his spiritual power. He had already unleashed his greatest spiritual power last night. There was no way the enemy wouldn't be wary of him. Any spiritual barriers or similar soul tools would certainly be in use now. If he carried out any spiritual detection, he would be sending himself straight into a trap. Although Hu Yuhao didn't really believe the Sun Moon Empire had any way of finding him, he wasn't going to take the risk. After returning to the hotel, Hu Yuhao called the Ice Bear King out from his spectral demoplane. Given his individual abilities, he wasn't really very impressive in Heaven Do City. However, it was different if he had Little Bai's help. Furthermore, he had some other plans. "Grandpa, what kind of place is that?" "It's really fun. Those skeletons are really interesting. But why are they running away from me?" Little Bai asked excitedly. Hu Yuhao hadn't set any boundaries for him in the demoplane. He had allowed him to bring Big Mao and Second Mao out to play. When Electrolux created this demoplane, he had made it so that the specters in the demoplane could evolve. Even Hu Yuhao didn't know where they got their energy from. According to the memories that Electrolux left behind, it should have its origins in spatial strength. As for how Electrolux managed to do that, he had no clue at all. It seemed to be a strength from another world. Unless his cultivation could reach that of Electrolux, there was no way he could possibly find any clues. Hu Yuhao said, "This is a demoplane that one of my teachers left behind for me. It's a parallel dimension of our world, and only I can open it. Since you like it here, I'll let you enter a few more times in the future. However, we've things to do now. You must follow my plan." Hu Yuhao recounted his plan to the Ice Bear King. He knew that the Ice Bear King was rather simple-minded, and wouldn't be able to remember a plan that was too complex. This was why he tried to simplify the mission that he gave the Ice Bear King. As for the complicated stuff, he left it for himself. After settling the plan, Hu Yuhao and Ice Bear King remained in the hotel to rest. 2 days later, the streets of Heaven Do City were still very crowded. It was already evening now, and the sky had just turned dark. This was the time when business was booming for hotels and restaurants. Apart from those who were going home, there were a lot of people who were proceeding towards restaurants and eating places. Hu Yuhao slowly walked among the crowd. After 2 days of observation, the situation in the palace had already quieted down. The damaged palace walls had already been repaired. As for what was going on in the palace, he didn't manage to find out anything through his spiritual detection. Today was the day he was going to truly take action. The imperial palace was already within sight from afar. Hu Yuhao naturally walked towards it. After this, he sat in a small restaurant not far from the palace. He ordered some dishes and sat there alone, eating by himself. It was at this moment that a figure silently came to the outside of the palace walls. The light around his body was distorted. It was as if this figure had completely assimilated with the air. It was just that streaks of air could be seen slightly distorting under the dim night lights. If he revealed his figure right now, everyone who had ever seen him would be shocked. This was because he was also Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao slowly walked with his toes on the ground. He leaped up and arrived above the palace walls. He silently unleashed his spiritual detection towards the inside of the palace. Indeed, just like he had expected, the defensive installations in the palace weren't any different from before. After all, it was quite unrealistic to install more oscillation and thermal detectors. The palace was so huge. How could they possibly find so many more spiritual surveillance soul tools in such a short period of time? Hu Yuhao found a spot that the oscillation detectors didn't cover, exploiting it to sneak into the palace. He quickly moved into the depths of the palace. The number of patrolling guards hadn't been increased either. Perhaps the Sun Moon Empire thought that ordinary soldiers didn't have any effect on title Dolor. Hu Yuhao went going deeper and deeper into the palace. Everything seemed to be business as usual. His spiritual detection was controlled within 100 meters from him. He didn't carry out any detection on a large scale. He only stopped when he was around 500 meters from the center of the palace, where he silently hid in a dark corner. It was also at this moment that the air started to undulate a little. Following this, snow started to fall from the sky. At the start, it was only a few snowflakes, but slowly, the wind became stronger and stronger. More and more snowflakes started to fall. Patches of snowflakes were being blown about by the raging winds. In just a short period of time, the entire palace was covered in a blizzard. It was weird, but this blizzard only engulfed the inside of the palace. It didn't leak out to any other parts of the Heavenly Soul Empire. At this moment, the people who were passing by not far from the palace were shocked. It was their first time seeing the palace being engulfed by a blizzard. Such a phenomenon would only occur in the extreme north. Although Heaven City was quite close to the north, and it would also snow in the winter, it was impossible for there to be a blizzard. This blizzard was very strong. When the snowflakes scratched the structures in the palace, piercing scratching sounds could be heard. The inside of the palace was a mess right now. Many of the patrolling guards were hurt by the blizzard. Furthermore, the temperature in the palace was also falling dramatically. From the original 10 degrees Celsius, the temperature soon fell to negative 20 degrees Celsius. The confusion and mess in the palace worsened due to this extremely cold temperature. Shadows dashed out continuously from the structures inside the royal palace. There were soul masters and soul engineers, but they couldn't do anything even if they were outside. How were they to face such a sinister change in the weather? Several intelligent soul engineers immediately realized that the problem was probably in the sky. Everyone flew separately into the air to investigate. However, they quickly ran into trouble once they actually went up into the sky. The further they went, the stronger the blizzard was, and fierce gales blew as their flying-type soul tools couldn't support them any further. Many soul engineers were directly blown back down, and they fell to their certain and miserable deaths. 3 elderly men appeared on a relatively tall roof inside the royal palace at the same time. One of them was the evil titled Dolor that he had seen before. The 2 other elderly men seemed a lot more normal, and 9 soul rings flickered on each of their bodies. These were 3 titled Dolor. Hu Hao was still hidden within a dark and shadowy corner, but he could observe everything that was happening around him with spiritual detection. There was no doubt that this blizzard came from the Ice Bear King, and his execution was very similar to how it was back in the extreme north. The Ice Bear King quietly left Heaven City before he followed Hu Hao's instructions as he took to the skies from a place where the surveillance soul tools above Heaven City couldn't reach. He went more than 4,000 meters above into the sky, far higher than the aerial surveillance soul tools could reach, before he flew above the royal palace and through this blizzard towards the ground. This was the strength of top-tier individuals. The Ice Bear King wasn't yet like an ultimate Dolor, but his strength was comparable to that of a rank 96 or rank 97 transcendent Dolor. Furthermore, even though his control over ice and snow wasn't at the level of the Ice Empress and the Snow Empress, who could control ultimate ice, it was sufficient for his blizzard to reach 100 degrees below zero. That was a very frightening number. The blizzard's strength became a lot weaker as it came down from the sky, but it could still reach 30 to 40 degrees below zero. That was an enormous threat to normal people. What's going on, Hall Master Jing? An evil soul master lowered his voice and asked. The person standing in the middle of the 3 elderly men was, surprisingly, someone who Hu Hao was very familiar with, Jing Hongchen, the illustrious Virtue Hall's Hall Master. Yes, Jing Hongchen wasn't in the illustrious Virtue Hall during the tremendous explosion in Radiant City. He wasn't the only one that wasn't there, his 2 grandchildren weren't there either. They were heavily injured during the grand competition, so they were receiving treatment from the royal palace's imperial physician. Jing Hongchen was protecting them by their side, and he was looking over his grandchildren. It was because of that they managed to avoid the disaster. Still, the great explosion had dealt a heavy blow to Jing Hongchen. The illustrious Virtue Hall was completely ruined, and his entire life's worth of blood and sweat was buried beneath rubble just like that. In addition to his grandchildren being heavily injured, he fell extremely sick because of these blows, and even his cultivation took a hit. Following Xiao Hongchen's gradual recovery, and in addition to the fact that Xu Tianran still relied heavily on him after ascending to the throne, his emotions were slowly able to recover. Jing Hongchen remained here as leader of Heavendo City after they conquered the Heavenly Soul Empire's capital. Heavendo City was considered one of the most popular large cities in the Doluo continent. Furthermore, it was positioned in the Heavenly Soul Empire's central and northern region that was lying towards the west. They could use this place as a stronghold, and this was thus a very important transition stop for storing food and transporting soldiers. This place held very important strategic importance for the Sun Moon Empire's invasion against the continent. Xu Tianran personally gave the order for Jing Hongchen to hold down the fort here, which also displayed that Xu Tianran had sufficient trust in him. The war was started a little hastily. That was the reason why the Sun Moon Empire's illustrious Virtue Hall was still being reconstructed. The Sun Moon Empire had to bear a great burden by starting this war, and even though they had gained the upper hand under Zhu Zi's appropriate battle strategies, their supply lines had been stretched longer and longer with the passage of time. They needed soldiers to stand guard over the territories that they had conquered from the Heavenly Soul Empire, while they had to fight back against the Heavenly Soul Empire's scattered attacks in their conquered territories, as well as against the reclusive sects who were hidden away in the dark. They expended a lot of resources and men every day, and that was the reason why the Sun Moon Empire had channeled and mobilized as much resources and power they could into this war. Jing Hanchen was a Class 9 soul engineer who was loyal to Xu Tianran, and he was naturally given an important responsibility. However, the Holy Ghost Church was starting to become increasingly outrageous within the Sun Moon Empire. Their supreme leader had requested that a soul master from the Holy Ghost Church to take a position of vice city leader in any large city that the Sun Moon Empire had conquered. The Sun Moon Empire's senior commanders expressed their strict opposition to that request at first. However, the Holy Ghost Church was just too powerful, especially because they had two ultimate Doluo. They were very useful for the Sun Moon Empire's invasion, so Xu Tianran had no choice but to accommodate their demands. He knew that the Holy Ghost Church was a little too large for efficient organization, but he had no choice, because he wanted to expand his territory. The strategy that Xu Tianran had in his heart was actually very simple. He wanted to continue using the Holy Ghost Church to expand the Sun Moon Empire's territory, and with the passage of war, the Holy Ghost Church's strength would undoubtedly be expended continuously. The Holy Ghost Church was an organization of evil soul masters. Evil soul masters were indeed powerful, but at the same time, powerful evil soul masters had their own problems, the problem of replenishing their numbers. The Holy Ghost Church only attained the scale that they were at today after accumulating their strength for thousands of years in the darkness. This wasn't done within 1 or 2 days. Once they had sustained too many deaths and losses, their overall strength would be continuously weakened. As the Sun Moon Empire dominated more territory, their national strength only became stronger, while the Sun Moon Empire's royal family would have more soul masters and soul engineers to command. When the time came, the Sun Moon Empire would become increasingly stronger, while the Holy Ghost Church would become continuously weaker, and Xu Tianran wouldn't be afraid that the Holy Ghost Church would turn against them. Furthermore, the two ultimate Doluo were powerful, but they were already more than 200 years old. They were very near the human limits, and who knew when these two would just pass away from old age. What Xu Tianran was truly afraid of were these two ultimate Doluo. The result of Xu Tianran accommodating the Holy Ghost Church in Heavendo City was another titled Doluo from the Holy Ghost Church here together with Jing Hongchen. This elder's title was Nightmare, and he was rare soul master who was adept with illusions. His martial soul was the Nightmare Demon, a soul beast that had very poor fighting skills, but extremely powerful illusory powers. That was the reason why his martial soul was very rare. The Nightmare Doluo hadn't unleashed his true powers when Hu Yuhao faced him that day. Both soul masters and normal citizens would enter a dreamlike state when struck by his illusory attacks. If that happened, then the Nightmare Doluo could kill that individual, and he could even control them in battle. The final result was that the person who was put into a nightmare would die regardless, while all that resentment and fear after death was most beneficial for the Nightmare Doluo's cultivation. The Nightmare Doluo once sent an entire village into a nightmare due to some private benefit a long time ago, and he became a public enemy. He was chased down by many soul masters, but his illusions were far too powerful, and he finally broke out while killing many of the Soul Masters who were chasing him. He all but disappeared in the end, and vanished off the grid. He was then recruited by the Holy Ghost Church. The Nightmare Dolor wasn't much of a threat to top-tier Soul Masters. Illusions were hardly effective against Transcendent Dolor, but if his nightmares were used against normal citizens or soldiers, then the destruction that he could cause could even surpass that of a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell. Therefore, his status in the Holy Ghost Church was relatively high, and he was one of the few who were consecrated by the Holy Ghost. His status was even above an elder. Back when the Sun Moon Empire was attacking Heaven Do City, the Nightmare Dolor had used his formidable illusions to confuse many soldiers on the city wall. He made them attack and murder each other, which created an incredible opportunity for the Sun Moon Empire, and he had remained after the city was broken. The Nightmare Dolor today didn't kill as much as he did back then. At his level, normal citizens and even low-tier soul masters and their resentment inside a nightmare were no longer enough to aid his cultivation. He needed soul masters at a certain standard so that he could improve. More accurately put, the more powerful a soul master's spiritual power, the stronger the resentment after dying under his nightmares. That kind of resentment was the most beneficial for him. Speak, All Master Jing. The Nightmare Dolor's face darkened as he pushed Jing Hongchen to speak. Jing Hongchen frowned and said, "I can only conclude that this isn't something created by soul tools. This should be a soul master's ability, and this person has to be a transcendent Dolor to bring such an enormous blizzard down upon us. I'll take a look up in the sky. I'll leave this place to the two of you." Wait, the Nightmare Dolor hurriedly stopped Jing Hongchen. "All Master Jing, if you discover that titled Dolor with formidable spiritual power, you have to notify me. We will try our best to capture him, and as long as we capture him, I'll do anything for you if you need me in the future." Jing Hongchen glanced at him and nodded. "All right." With that, he flew high into the sky. The powerful winds in the blizzard weren't enough to block him, as he was a Class 9 soul engineer, and they could only reduce his speed. The Nightmare Dolor was furious after Hu Yuhao had escaped the other day, but he couldn't find any traces of him at all. However, he had felt very excited after that day. Hu Yuhao was a spiritual type soul master, and if he perished under his nightmares, then that soul master's resentment would be extremely beneficial for him. From his perspective, Hu Yuhao should be a spiritual type titled Dolor. He was very clear that his nightmares and illusory abilities were insufficient to directly kill a spiritual type titled Dolor. However, he would have a much higher chance of success after severely injuring a person, while the resentment produced after killing them would be the same. This person's death could even help his soul power, which had been stagnant for a long time, improve once more. The Nightmare Dolor was at rank 91, and evil soul masters had a very difficult time improving after reaching the later stages of cultivation. The Holy Ghost Church had been accumulating strength for so many years, and they had accumulated quite a few titled Dolor. However, Transcendent Dolor were few and far between, and there were just several of them. It wasn't hard to see how difficult it was to become an evil Transcendent Dolor. Therefore, the Nightmare Dolor was extremely interested in capturing Hu Yuhao, and that was why he didn't hold back in asking Jing Hongchen for help. Aerial battle wasn't his forte, and in terms of direct fighting strength, the Class 9 soul engineer Jing Hongchen was much stronger than he was. Hu Yuhao had been observing Jing Hongchen and the other two through spiritual detection. He wasn't worried at all as Jing Hongchen rose into the sky, as the Ice Bear King's strength wasn't something that Jing Hongchen could easily fight against. Battles that occurred 5,000 meters up in the sky were based on absolute strength, as many soul tools would be weakened. Of course, Jing Hongchen had many ways of preserving his own life, and Little Bai wouldn't be able to do anything to him even though Jing Hongchen couldn't defeat him. Furthermore, Little Bai had already accomplished the first step of his task. He should already be retreating, and he probably wouldn't clash with Jing Hongchen. The royal palace was still in a state of disarray at this moment. The blizzard's viciousness wasn't what caused the chaos, as this was the Heavenly Soul Empire's royal palace after all. The structures inside were tough, far stronger than the Sun Moon Empire's tents back in the extreme north. The blizzard couldn't cause much harm if they stayed inside their rooms. Of course, that was also because this blizzard came from 5,000 meters high in the sky. The blizzard's strength would be very different if the Ice Bear King had unleashed it from the ground. The thing that was causing such disarray in the royal palace was the increasingly dropping temperature. Soul Masters would also be affected once the temperature reached 30 degrees below zero, and these effects weren't minor. Normal soldiers couldn't even move around at all. More and more Soul Masters and Soul Engineers appeared outside. It was very difficult to pass down orders in such a tremendous blizzard, and they could only fight against it passively as they resisted the biting cold. The soul power undulations and spiritual undulations within the royal palace were very messy under such circumstances. Huo activated spiritual detection once more, and he avoided the two-titled Dolor on the roof as he stretched his spiritual detection toward those areas with a lot of people. He had to find a single target so that he could make a move. An evil Soul Master's soul power undulations were vastly different from those of normal Soul Masters, and their auras were different as well. It wasn't difficult to find an evil Soul Master. Huo wanted to find an evil Soul Sage. Such an individual would be considered relatively powerful and higher up in the hierarchy, so he had to know quite a few secrets. Indeed, Huo quickly found his target after his spiritual power webbed out. There were several evil Soul Masters clustered together amid the chaos, gathered in a room about 400 meters away from him. There was one person who was clearly the leader of the group, and the others all had relatively weaker cultivations. This individual was a Soul Sage, and he emanated bluish-grey soul power undulations that circled around his body. The other evil Soul Masters all had 4 or 5 soul rings, and there were 5 of them altogether. That's him, Huo's eyes squinted as he immediately made his move. He snuck towards that location in a flash, and quickly came close behind that evil Soul Master. His eyes flickered as he closed in on the room, and he sent a single strike of spiritual shock against one of the 4-ringed evil Soul Masters. The 4-ringed Soul Ancestor made a stifled grunt as he gradually crumbled to the ground. Blood flowed from his eyes, nose, ears, and mouth as he didn't seem like he could live through this. Who goes there? The Soul Sage roared as he dashed out of the room in a flash and immediately caught sight of Huo, who had just turned to run away. An enemy. Evil Soul Masters were typically quite conceited, even though one of their own had perished. Huo deliberately created an image that presented himself in this evil Soul Master's eyes as a 7-ringed Soul Sage with 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 3 black soul rings. Evil Soul Masters always believed that they were invincible against others of the same rank. The evil Soul Master saw that his enemy was just a Soul Sage, and he accelerated in pursuit of Huo without figuring out his actual strength. The two-titled Dolor immediately noticed the disturbance from the rooftop far away, but they didn't move at all. The reason was simple, it was because of the number of soul rings that Huo displayed. Soul rings were an absolute representation of one's strength for most Soul Masters. Their enemy was just a Soul Sage, and there was already an evil Soul Sage in pursuit, so these two-titled Dolor didn't have to interfere at all. They still had to pay attention to the big picture to prevent any top-tier individuals appearing among their enemies' ranks. Huo escaped very quickly. All the surveillance soul tools were severely affected by the blizzard in the sky, and they couldn't lock down on his position, and so Huo wasn't attacked by soul tools because they didn't have a lock on his location. The Nightmare Dolor would never have expected that the vicious blizzard in the sky was meant to create space for Huo to escape in this moment. Furthermore, he would never have expected that a blizzard of such an enormous scale was just so that Huo could capture an evil Soul Master, rather than for an ambush. The evil Soul Master who was chasing Huo was also very quick. 3 skeletal heads that were emanating dark green flames encircled his body, and spurted from behind him. Those flames continuously boosted his speed, and he was slowly bearing down on Huo. The Heavenly Soul Empire's royal place wasn't small, but it wouldn't take a Soul Sage very long to leave its premises at full strength. It would appear that Huo using the Ice Bear King's blizzard to trick a Soul Sage was a little bit overkill. But in reality, Huo would have wasted a lot more time and energy looking for an opportunity if that didn't happen, and his current plan was much quicker and more straightforward. The royal palace was a mess in this moment. That was Blizzard's most fearsome characteristic in group battles. Huo lamented in his heart as he ran, as he thought about how fantastic it would have been if his snowy dance of ultimate ice could reach such an enormous size. Even if his domain attack didn't possess such destructiveness, simply creating such disarray while complementing his imitation would greatly increase his undercover abilities. The royal palace's wall was in front of him, and the soul sage who was chasing him was about 30 meters behind him, in range for most offensive soul skills. There were 2 rows and a total of 8 small soul thrusters on Hui Yuhao's back, and they activated at the same time as they immediately propelled his body forward. Hui Yuhao was like a cannonball as he arrived at the palace wall in the blink of an eye. The evil soul master behind him almost vomited blood. He felt like he was getting in range to attack his enemy, and he was just about to unleash a soul skill to attack Hui Yuhao when he accelerated and escaped his grasp. That feeling was just too hard to bear. Can he really be that lucky? The evil soul sage was furious as he hurriedly accelerated in pursuit. How could he know that everything was under Hui Yuhao's control with spiritual detection, and that it had nothing to do with luck? The truth was that, with Hui Yuhao's abilities, he could use many different ways to shake his opponent off in terms of speed. The reason why he used soul thrusters was because he wanted to conceal his powers as much as possible. Hui Yuhao leapt into the sky as he tapped his foot gently against the palace wall, and bolted out. He didn't go up into the sky, as there were many aerial surveillance soul tools above him. Even though the blizzard had destroyed some, there were still some left. Hui Yuhao found the Ice Bear King with spiritual detection. He asked the Ice Bear King to leave the city first and wait for him outside. That was because Hui Yuhao had already sensed that Jing Hongchen was searching for the Ice Bear King's traces high in the sky, so calling to the Ice Bear King for aid would be counterproductive. The evil soul master behind him was close in pursuit. The 3 large skeletal heads around him radiated green light, and he seemed to be using his full strength as he charged at Hui Yuhao at breakneck speed. A faint and cold smile surfaced beneath Hui Yuhao's eyes. It's about time. There's a lot less surveillance and monitoring outside the royal palace while the blizzard has covered the royal palace. I have to take him down as quickly as possible. Hui Yuhao turned around and raced along the palace wall. The evil soul sage was about to attack when Hui Yuhao used his soul thrusters to shake him off once more. They would arrive in a relatively spacious area if they continued forward, as the streets close to the royal palace were extremely wide and spacious. They were in the dark of night, so there wasn't anybody outside the royal palace. The evil soul master became even more furious. This fellow is too slippery. Does he really think that he can shake me off within Heavendoe City? Even though he didn't really know how to use soul tools, he was very clear about what the Sun Moon Empire's aerial surveillance soul tools could do. He believed that soul engineers would chase Hui Yuhao down very quickly to help him capture this guy. But for a person like him, who was so arrogant and perhaps even twisted, he didn't wish for others to interfere. However, he suddenly realized that the soul sage who was running away in front of him slowed, and the distance between them was closed in an instant. Is he tired? He can no longer explosively unleash soul power? The evil soul sage was overjoyed. He pointed his right hand at Hui Yuhao, and a sharp howl could be heard as one of the 3 skeletal heads orbiting around him flew out and blasted straight at Hui Yuhao. This evil soul sage's martial soul was very extraordinary. His mother had passed away when he was born from a difficult birth, and they were inside the wilderness. He remained in the wilderness for several days before someone rescued him, and the toxins from his mother's corpse flowed into his body, which caused his martial soul to have such intense mutations. His martial soul became a skeletal head after mutating. Furthermore, he was different from normal soul masters. Normal soul masters' martial souls themselves would evolve and improve as they became stronger, and as soul masters obtained higher cultivation ranks. But his martial soul was extremely peculiar, as he would gain another skeletal head with each extra soul ring. He had only released 3 skeletal heads so far, and that was just part of his full strength. This video will end here.